Hello everyone, I'm Rachel Garahan, Jewellery and Watch Director at British Vogue. I'm very pleased to have you all here and on Instagram Live. I'd like to introduce you to Gaia Repossi, who at the age of just 21 became Creative Director of Repossi, the firm that her grandfather founded, which was 15 years ago. And to Cristina Villegas, who is Director of Mining at Pact, which is a non-profit organisation that links communities and works with them to find more sustainable solutions to their lives. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Gaia, congratulations on 15 years, first of all. And I know that you wanted to celebrate the anniversary in a meaningful way. What made you decide to create Chromatic Sapphires?
Hi, Lo. Thank you for having me, and we're very pleased to talk about a topic that is very dear to me, myself, and I believe the industry as well. I think for us it was just an evidence, MoyoGems was presented to us through different stone dealers we work with, and especially one that is specified in sapphires. And we believe that nowadays these progressive ways, which you will explain better how it works, are in evidence. And there was no question we decided to support it among other projects that we have at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Christina. The gem industry is famously opaque, and there are lots of gems pass through lots of hands and countries before they reach the final wearer. So how did MoyoGems come to be, and what are you trying to do differently?
Well, first of all, I often call MoyoGems my dream come true. It is focused on the female miners of Tanzania, and we connect them to end users like Gaia here, and the consumers that wear her pieces. What we have done is shorten the supply chain, and so there's a very direct route to market. The miners are no longer anonymous individuals who sell their gems. We know their name. We know their communities. We know their name. And we've actually changed their lives. The miners consistently tell us that they make between 3 and 10 times what they're making before Moyo. And I always get hugs, huge hugs, when I go to these areas, because not only are they making that much money, they're also getting new investments through the LVMH brand Tiffany and Company, and Brilliant Earth and others that are funneling investments to economic savings groups and health and safety programs. So we not only know their name, but we're also improving their communities directly.
And how, before you established MoyoGems, how did it work? There are many artisanal mining communities around the world, right? How do they normally get their stones to market?
Mm-hmm. So most people have no idea that between 80 and 90% of all colored gemstones around the world are mined by what are called artisanal and small-scale miners. These are people using shovels and picks and human strength to dig minerals out of the ground. So it's unlike diamonds. These are rural people trying to make a living. And what we were finding in our data is that they were skipping meals. They were running and selling their gems when they were hungry. And because the supply chain is set up the way it is, the system is rigged against them. And so everyone has an incentive to keep that price very low. And so when I was there recently, the miners in Tanzania told me, Christina, we were starving before. And to work in a luxury industry and to hear that broke my heart. But now, because Moyo's been there about 3 years now, people their homes are changed, they're dressing better, they're no longer skipping meals. And that's what the data told us as well. They were having 1 meal a day. And now they're eating routinely. The kids are in school. So it's really hard to quantify. We can quantify their income, but it's also hard to quantify what the power of bringing this global attention to these communities. They love seeing their pictures on Instagram. But to answer your question, they would run to a local broker who would then sell to a broker and another broker and another broker. And that would change hands between 5 and 7 times until it got to the export. And then it would go to gem dealers in various European capitals and then on to the jewelers. So we've shortened that supply chain where we have 1 or 2 local brokers. And the miner is making 95% of the export value of those stones, which compared to 10 to 15% before, it's life-changing. So it's something I'm really proud of.
I'm sure. And it was always specifically with women in mind, I think, which I think is part of what appealed to you, Gaia.
Absolutely. I mean, not only women, but it's very important to sustain and support causes that act on the ground with simple solutions. I think it's the future, of an industry, is the future of environmental issues and how to be more responsible. And I strongly believe in finding actions locally and progressive way of thinking, including women, of course, in the mining industry. Yeah.
Yeah, most people have no idea that 30% of all miners worldwide are women. People are shocked when I tell them that. They try to argue with me and then they realize I'm right. But they're overlooked. And one of the reasons that we started bringing this program to women is because unless you start with women, you don't get to 50-50. They're an afterthought if you don't start with them. And also, why not start with women? I'm a feminist. But I also noticed that that because people don't think they're miners, they don't get the services and they don't get the training that others do. And so that discrimination makes them, it's like this vicious cycle. They're never thought of as miners, they don't receive the training. And so we have focused on women. We have opened it up to men too, because they mine too. But the men are only allowed under certain conditions. They must join the Women's Association, which they're welcome to do, but they can't run for office and they can't vote. And that makes sure that the women stay in charge of the association that they started, and that it's very attuned to their needs. So right now we're about 60% women in Moyo and 40% men, and we're going to keep it that way.
One of the things I love about chromatic sapphires is the range of colours that you chose for the collection. What made you choose the stones that you did?
Well, generally these kind of sapphires that were actually presented to me are used in a different type of pellet. Traditionally it's called tutti frutti, multicolor. It's not the same aesthetic as I have a tendency to like with colors. So the unusual way of using them is just going through a very fresh, young and pellet to probably modernize as well the industry of these kind of sapphires. So they go from a pellet of peach to pink to bright purple and very delicate. And so in a way it's a little bit more modern. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Christina, what does Repossi's collection mean for Moyo? Does it help in terms of raising awareness?
It means that Moyo has gone mainstream, and which is really special. It's no longer a cute little project. It is now on the runways of Paris. And so we were so delighted when Gaia's team at Repossi reached out to us and told us that we would be at Paris Fashion Week. I never thought that was going to happen. And then here we are at Selfridges. And it's been remarkable. I want to make sure we always preference the smaller brands because small is beautiful. And also with MoyoGems, what you get is what comes out of the earth. And it's not always 10,000 of the same color gemstones of the same shape. It's much better suited for the smaller brands. And that's where we started. We started with smaller brands. So I'm just really delighted to be with Gaia here and to be part of the Repossi collection.
Yeah. Also on a sustainable level, a scale of brand of my size allows still to react and produce less. And so it goes with the sustainable concept of using smaller mines that don't overexploit the ground. So that goes into the whole concept, jewelry already being slow consumption, but indeed that's a very important side. And also what surprised me about the MoyoGem for knowing mines, the fact that they're educated to know the prices of the stones that are the prices of the final sale is something pretty revolutionary and new. I never heard miners being able to sell themselves the stones and know exactly the reality of the final price. So it's a very progressive idea.
Yeah, if I might just add to that, one thing that we were realizing is it was in everyone's best interest to keep the miners in the dark about what they had. And so when I first approached these villages with a program that was funded by the Gemological Institute of America, GIA, they were presenting me with dirty gems because no one had told them to clean them to evaluate what they had. No one had told them to pre-sort by value. So they were selling their rubies by the kg, which is shocking, but that's what was happening. And so that's how we're able to make these huge livelihood gains, because we taught them how to pre-sort. We taught them what most consumers will want: the clean, the bright color from across the room. We also tell them when they sell to us why we're buying certain stones and why we're not. And that might seem really simple, but they've never gotten that feedback before. That's what they're telling us. Even in Kenya, where we just launched our newest Moyo program, one miner told me, she's like, I was going to give up on mining because I just was making a few dollars. But now I know I can actually make this income. And so I know exactly what you want. I'm going to bring that to you next time. So that kind of feedback makes them better miners. And also, it also changes communities when women have more money.
Yeah,
that's well documented.
And with the support of companies and other jewelers like Repossi, you've been able to grow quite a bit in a short time. Isn't that right? You told me how many miners you started with and what you have today.
Yeah, with the initial GIA program, we started off with 60 miners. And then we grew to 200 about a year later. And then we were at 400, and now we're at 700. That's within 3 years. So we've been scaling. We're really focusing on scaling, so we can really serve the most consumers we can, and brands like Repossi. So it's with that brand demand and that consumer demand that we're able to grow. So that the biggest thing that anyone can do is buy the gems, and the second thing that people can do is invest in these communities.
Yeah. Guy, I know the role of women in the jewellery industry is something that's close to your heart in terms of changing the status quo, as it were. Like, men have dominated the industry for a very long time. Do you think a project like Moyo helps in that process to make change?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm very interested in the fact that there's this educational angle, this sort of microeconomy concept of giving them an actual business approach where people understand and can make a future. Absolutely. I mean, the vision of that and inclusion should be broad.
Yeah. I also think your jewellery is very well suited to a time when women are buying jewellery for themselves.
Yeah.
This is not jewellery that men are buying as a kind of token of...
Could be both.
Yeah, could be both.
No.
But the traditional idea of men buying jewellery that basically it's like an indication of how much money they might
Absolutely. No, it's beyond adornment. It's about a statement, it's about design, it's about inclusivity, it's about many things. You know, the market has changed, the evolution of the world has changed, so jewelry is to follow. We can't be behind, opposite.
I hope that that there will be more female miners coming through. Do you hope to roll out Moyo to other countries and even other continents, not just in Africa?
Watch that space.
Oh, okay.
When we first launched Moyo, I was getting messages from all over the world of miners wanting the best price they can. because of course that's what we all want. But we want to make sure that we center ourselves on female miners. That's what inspired the world, and that's what's got us the positive attention. Women miners and their male allies, of course. This is Asha here in the back with her colleagues. I think she's been mining for a few years now, but she mines green tourmaline. We will only expand where there's a kind of critical mass of women miners, and where there's beautiful stones, because of course folks like Gaia here need beautiful stones for their jewelry. So watch that space. We have in Tanzania, there's 3,000 miners with our partner organization, the Tanzanian Women Miners Association. They work with 3,000 women across Tanzania. So I have a feeling that our first expansion beyond Kenya will be actually within Tanzania, where we began, to make sure that they're served well, and then elsewhere in Africa and maybe other continents.
Yes, because is that pattern of inequality for women miners, is that repeated around the world? It's not just in that region or in that African.
It's a common story. One of the miners, her name's Hadija. I first met her when I was looking for the right place to start the GIA program. It had to be a stable place, a place where most miners were licensed, where there's no child labor, and where visible foreigners could walk around without a problem. And so I met Hadija, and she had learned to mine from her father, who had a huge license area. And her father passed away recently, and I asked her, I said, how did that go for you? Because my understanding in Tanzania is that when the man dies, relatives will come in and kick the woman out, and she might be destitute. And she said, yes, that would happen in most cases, but our concession was so big that it didn't happen to me. And my brothers and I did not have to fight over the concession because it was big enough for all of us. But I think that story of sudden loss, sudden vulnerability, it is a common story. A few years ago, the most common profile for women miners that I had met was a widow. Or someone escaping a violent environment. So they had realized that they could leave because of mining. They were making money. Gold could actually buy them their freedom to leave that situation. So on the one hand, I think we often think that mining comes from a place of vulnerability, but sometimes it can provide a source of strength. Unfortunately, many women around the world face that situation. And currently we're getting a lot of women who used to be farmers. And so now they're switching to mining because the rains are less predictable. So from a climate change perspective, they're starting to enter mining. Now, mining is the unsustainable use of natural resources. It'll go away one day. So part of the conversation with Moyo is, here's how to make a better living with mining. But what will you do after that's gone? Here's how to diversify your incomes. Let's talk about that. You can buy a roof for your house, small. Over time, you'll have a new roof. And that message really hit home with COVID, when the supply chains froze. And those who diversified fared better. But those who didn't, we had to start doing food drop-offs during COVID.
In what ways are miners diversifying then? What other things are you helping them find?
Some are starting sisal plantations. Sisal it goes into it's like jute rugs that's made of sisal, and it's an appropriate plant for like a dry environment. The most common one is chicken coops and chicken farming. They use it to feed themselves in the wet season, to sell for extra income. So that's the most common one. And it depends on the place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think one of the most wonderful things about MoyoGems is the human face it puts to mining. you know, it's a very anonymous industry generally. People exchanging packets of gems, you know, over a negotiation at a desk far away from the person that dug it from the ground. So I think that's a really important part of MoyoGems, and that the person buying a piece from the collection can see who dug that gem out of the ground. Don't you think, Guy?
Absolutely. I mean, putting a face in the storytelling in the human level and the humanitarian level is absolutely gorgeous. You know, you do this thing of putting a picture per stone, and when you see the characters in the interviews and they tell them their experience on you know, this economical level where they become part of the industry from the beginning is extremely progressive. And I think human stories are the future, you know, on a larger level, and that's what's the most touching part of the foundation, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think sustainability was a very difficult subject for me to cover as an editor and a writer. And what has helped in recent years is it becoming a much more widely accepted subject matter generally, but also there being these human stories that people can connect with and that make sense to them. So, you know, that's what is so special.
And awareness, you know, it's a large industry, the jewelry industry, the fashion industry that you cover. It's, you know, the moment you realize there's awareness and there's step-by-steps from supporting gems that have a progressive point of view instead of radically wanting to change things. Of course, we're all responsible to change things, but starting by
you have to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere. You have to continue, and that's how the future will evolve. So step by step is the key.
So would you hope that Repossi can roll out more things in the, you know, not jewelry is a hard thing to say. It can never be sustainable because it's a luxury, I guess, at the end of the day. But there are things that we can all do better.
Well, it is sustainable
because it's long lasting.
It's long lasting. It's something you keep forever. It can have a meaning. It can have a face with human stories from the beginning of your stone, from the purchase, from the design, from the person who designed it as well, to the people in the industry. And so, you know, there's a human side to be dug. And of course, to continue support foundations, to continue support very progressive point of view. I believe immensely in intersectionalism as an environmental point where you find solutions on the ground, where foundations or organizations like yours have different ideas of how to find solutions per regions and adapt it to the problems. And the main problem that we have is that it's not a sustainable industry. So step by step, you find solutions, and already ideas like these are
I think it's a case of working with the community that you're trying to help.
Ideas like the one that these miners and this MoyoGem organization are the pre-steps of big changes. You know, I don't think the industry will stay the same. It can't.
Yeah, I'll come in on that. So the Moyo program started with this GIA program that focused on education, on how to clean your gems, how to separate them. But the women were telling us that they were still selling when they were hungry, and they asked for more market opportunities so they could have consistent, predictable market access. And so I found some international traders, and we went back to Tanzania and met with them. It's like this old school house with peeling paint and, you know, blackboards from like 1960s or so. The desks were kind of falling apart, actually. And we sat with the ladies and said, you know, we have this idea. We'd like to talk about it with you. If you don't want to do it, no problem. You still get lunch. But if you like it, let's talk about it. And so over 2 days, we designed Moyo with them, which very rarely happens. It's usually someone sitting off in a far-flung place, or someone sitting in a city and then dreaming up ideas for far-flung places. But with Moyo, we actually sat with them. And one of the reasons we partner with the Association of Women Miners in Tanzania is so we can get that feedback loop about what was going right, what was going wrong. And they could advocate on behalf of their members. And so we have a customer service desk at the end of each market day, and that's where the miners tell us what we could do better next time, and to make sure that we continue to focus on them, to make it miner oriented. So to get back to your, I think Gaia's point about making sure these are community solutions, it was designed by miners themselves and facilitated by us. But that's one of the reasons I think it's so special. And I asked them, if philanthropy were to happen here, what are your priorities? And they said health centers for maternal and child health, and teacher housing. And I was like, teacher housing? Tell me about that. And one of the teachers grabbed my hand and then took me to her house, and where she shared it with two other teachers. And they said that they can't attract good teachers for their schools without good teacher housing. And that made sense to me. And so education's a huge priority for these ladies who want their kids to grow up with better futures. And health, community health and access to it is a huge priority. So these priorities come from them. I just happen to be a messenger.
And do you think that the mining community more broadly is sort of addressing those concerns on the gem side of the industry anyway?
We need more help,
Yeah.
certainly. So we have a number of foundations that are focused on economic savings groups and literacy and health and safety. But we definitely need an education partner to help make the schools better, help with teacher housing, and this health issue that they raised. There's still a lot to be done.
I mean, I think today consumers are very motivated, especially younger consumers, in their purchases by something with a story like this, something that has substance and meaning, and you think that you might be helping someone very far away. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's happening, Gaia?
Of course, the consumers are waiting for all the brands, all the markets, for changes, for solutions, for ideas. They don't want things to be static, so expectation is huge, I think. Not only from the young generations, I think it's our duty. Yeah, there's no option.
How about you, Christina?
Yeah, I think consumers are looking for new ways to connect with what they wear. And that's one of the things that Moyo is really focusing on is the storytelling. Telling the stories of the communities, of the women, because it's really powerful. And there are ways for consumers to directly engage with these communities, again, through philanthropy, or by buying the good stuff. That's how we change the world, is by buying the good stuff and, really changing this industry by the purchasing power.
Thank you. I want to find out if anyone has any questions, or if you have anything to add before we open it up to questions.
I have a question. How does it impact sales? Are more people buying the collection as a consequence of the stories behind it?
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of attraction of design, of course, a design that compels certain elements, like these are a plus, and of course it sells really well.
You've nearly sold out of this initial collection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're getting more and more traders asking to be partners on Moyo. So I think word is out that sales are good. And we do full traceability on blockchain with MoyoGems. So we actually tell you who mined your gem, which I think is the first one to be done in the world, to be quite honest. So there's some brands that have, quote unquote, doubled down on Moyo because it's selling, but it also aligns with their brand values. And they told me that one of the reasons they love Moyo is because we tell them the name of the miner, but we also give them a picture. Not in all cases, but where we have a picture. We always ask for the consent of the miner to have that picture taken. So it's always a choice. And if If a picture's on our website, we have that consent. So where we don't have consent, we might show hands, we might show them looking away. But so far, demand is strong, and we're expanding, and we're getting more and more partners.
Christine.
Mm-hmm. How does it work when a mine belongs to someone? Because you mentioned concessions, so is it every miners that got a bit of the concession to just mine and then they keep what they find? But if it's a mine that belongs to somebody else, how can you replicate the program?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Let me just repeat the question for our Instagram viewers. How does, if I get it right, this is, how does ownership of the mines affect what you do?
So every MoyoGem, all the miners are required to take gemology classes that are free in Swahili in their village. They're required to take health and safety classes. They're required to be a member of association. And lastly, and most difficult, is they're required to show that they have a legal license or they're working on a legal license to mine. That is really hard in most cases. To your question about what happens when it's a larger mine or when it's an advanced small-scale mine, in the areas where we work, there are no larger mines. So there might be advanced small-scale, or they might, but in most situations, it's artisanal environments. So people using shovels and picks. Small scale is more like dump trucks and excavators you start seeing. So there's a few different ways to show this. The first way is have a license in your name, and that's the simplest. There's also something called group licenses, which cost the same as an individual license. And so if we're all poor and hungry, we can band together, get a group license, cost the same, divide it amongst ourselves, and you're all part of Moyo. And then there's a third option, I call it a bridge agreement, where you're the boss, and we're all working on your license. We have formalized that agreement from a verbal agreement to a written agreement. So there's a template that says, I, Christine, allow Christina to mine on my license. My license number is XYZ, it expires 2023. Signed Christine, signed Christina, you're in. So all these ways are accepted by the Tanzanian government. And with Kenya, the rules are slightly different. But you can see, it's a kind of complicated answer. Try not to get too technical on you, but we're trying to reflect the actual legal environment where people are mining and trying to honor the poorest of the poor who might want to be part of the program. And so instead of making an exclusive standard where very few people can actually reach it, we're trying to make it an inclusive standard. So kind of lowering the bar a little bit, but having some rules. And that way, we're not leaving people behind when we call something responsible.
Avril.
A question for Christina again. You said earlier on that the miner's income has gone up by about 95% because you've obviously cut out quite a lot of the sort of the broker process going from one hand to another. In that case, the brokers are presumably making an awful lot less than they were. So how do you get through that level where you do need to work with brokers, and what to persuade them that it's going to be presumably profitable for them?
I was going to ask that question, so I'm glad you have. I wanted to ask how the rest of the community feels about it, particularly those that benefited from the previous norm, the traders that would buy the gems from the miners. How do they feel now, and how are they affected, and how do you keep them on side, presumably?
Right. Yeah, that's probably the most frequently asked question I get, is what happens when you cut people out. On the mining side, we take a village approach. So we allow, we approach the village leadership, and we allow anybody who complies by the rules to join Moyo. And that's how we can prevent sabotage within the village and bad feelings. And that's why we allowed them into the program, because they started asking us, where's our program? And so we started allowing them into the program to make sure we promote harmony. with the brokers, a few are allowed in. So we are required by Tanzanian law to include the brokers in the process. So what we've done is turn them from adversaries to allies. The brokers, the miners have nominated 4 brokers that they trust, that are from the community. We help them get licensed because that's part of the rules. And then the miner chooses who she wants to work with on market day. And then that person comes and helps her negotiate with the international buyer. So they help sort when she first gets there for their top tier 1, 2, and 3 material. So we're using their gemological knowledge to help make things faster. And then she's also that person's also a negotiator in the actual buying room. And it's a win-win because she makes 95% of the export value of the stone and the broker makes 5%. The higher the price, win-win. And the brokers are quite happy because they're making more in a few days than they would in several months. So it's a windfall for them. So they're coming back market day after market day, wanting to be part of it. We're using that model in Kenya as well, even though it's not part of the law. We have seen as a really positive model to keep possible saboteurs close and part of the program, and everyone wins. So we're using their market knowledge and helping them win as well. And just put things in perspective, the Tonga region, the Umba Valley of Tanzania, it's like a rainbow. Everything comes out of there. It's amazing. But we're like a drop in the bucket when it comes in terms of the gem sales. So we're still very small. And in between market days, women still need to sell to someone. So by making those relationships from adversaries to allies, we're also protecting the ladies between market days.
Does that answer your question? Does anyone have any other questions? Please.
Christina, would you mind sharing your background pre-MoyoGems? What brought you to this point?
What was your background before MoyoGems? What brought you here?
Yeah, I was pausing for the Instagram.
Sorry,
repeat
my Instagram version.
Other question. Before Moyo, I was working in Washington, D.C. For an international foundation called the Fund for Global Human Rights. And more and more of their grantees were these small indigenous rights organizations in the middle of nowhere that were affected by point source pollution problems. Sorry to get technical. I really got interested in where human rights, mining, supply chains all collide in one place. But mining's about people, and that's one thing that I've learned over the years. It's not about technology, about people, and you need the social scientists involved in these mining conversations. So people often see, oh, you're the director of the mining program. Are you an engineer? And my response is, well, I speak engineer, and I speak geologist, and I speak economist. But we need these incentives for people to come out of the shadows and into legal supply chains where they can really benefit. After that, I got my degree at LSE down the road at London School of Economics, and then I worked for a specialized consultancy, and then I was recruited by PACT, which is a large NGO, and started Moyo about 5 years ago. Well, actually 4 years ago, but started my gemstone learning about 5 years ago.
One other question for Mike. And Gaia, are you able to share what's next for Repossi and Moyo? Do you have another collection coming up or pieces?
Yes, I mean, we're definitely thinking to continue beautiful colors. There's different directions. I can't reveal it yet, but it's coming.
DBC.
Watch that space.
Yeah.
In terms of the brokers that you mentioned, is there a focus on them being women to start with and then you incorporate men, or?
Better repeat the question.
Repeating this. Do you have a focus on having female brokers and then introducing male ones?
In Tanzania, we haven't found female brokers. That's just the reality of power. But we have had minors express interest in becoming brokers. So we have not worked on that yet, but it's something that we're paying attention to. In Kenya, there are lots of female brokers. And so we started off with 2 on the Kenya side this year. We launched in Kenya. And we're working with the Association of Women in Extractive Industries in Kenya. And so we will grow into that pretty quickly because we've seen the ladies at work and we know we can incorporate them into the program.
Has your experience in Tanzania been really helpful in, rolling things out in Kenya?
Yes and no. So Tanzania and Kenya share a language, Kiswahili. They share a border. They share a gem belt. But sometimes they could be like worlds apart. And so it cannot be a copy and paste exercise. There's different legal environments that we have to be aware of. And then just different power dynamics as well. But one thing we did was bring a group of Kenyan miners with our partner and the government down to Tanzania to watch a market day in action. And I asked them, we're not going to copy and paste. I want you to look at this and think about how we could adjust this for the Kenyan context. But it has to be responsibly sourced or else people are not going to buy the stuff. And it has to be really miner centered. And so how can we adjust what you see here to your context? And so there's a whole co-design workshop that they did. And so the rules are very similar, but the legal process is very different. And even in Tanzania, we're expanding to another place, and we did a co-design workshop there to make sure we really understood the context.
Yeah, because I suppose you could copy and paste and then just have a much less effective solution or something that actually was damaging to a case. It's what you were saying, Gaia, about intersectional approach. Using all the different elements
Every
to
region
make
has
it
its own.
make it work.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons, avoiding the copy and paste and avoiding the kind of inclination to kind of do what you did before. We have incorporated the customer service rooms at the end of the market days in Kenya as well to make sure that that the miners are interviewed in Swahili by someone that they would know, and we ask them, how can we improve? And we found out in Kenya that sometimes they learned, we didn't reach everybody that we could have. Some people felt left out, and so we can do that better next time. We can recruit better, and so that'll be the future, the focus of the future.
In terms of the miners themselves?
Yeah, who was a part of the program. So that's a lesson, and we will take that and we will improve it next time.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Do you think jewelry is sustainable? And how can larger size brands start to aim towards a more sustainable approach?
Like we said earlier, jewelry is about slow consumption already. So technically it's not fast consumption. So it aims for something lasting. So that's already a category I'm happy, to not overflood the market with a million products. So it is sustainable in a way. The fact that human histories are interesting from the stones to the design is because jewelry is an ancestral part of our history, very important thing that is studied from anthropology to archaeology. So it is within our history. So it is a long-lasting thing, and it should, and the way it should evolve, it should never go into fast consumption. It should never go into overflow production. So that is the key.
Yeah, again, and jewelry is about emotional connection, isn't it? Which
human history,
which is why we pass it
not
down.
only emotional through family, it is also in cultural heritage, through designs, through time, through tribal designs, punk designs. It's broader. It's not just about owning things. It has an aesthetic, it's a language.
And the second part of the question being how larger brands, what's their responsibility to
Like we
to
said,
change?
a complete brand nowadays is a brand that is progressive and that looks ahead and supports causes and has ideas. And if organizations have solutions and want to find some, brands have to do the same.
If I could come in on that. So for MoyoGems, the ideal customer for us are the smaller brands because of just the nature of gem mining. What comes out of the ground is what you can use. And we don't have 10,000 of the same gem. But for larger brands, there's always a place to start. And so I always say, unless you can tell me the country of origin, there's no way you can say something's responsible. And so the country of origin is the minimum piece of information that anyone needs, because the risks in Afghanistan will be very different from the risks in Bolivia to the risks in Peru and the risks in Zambia. So I think that's my challenge for the major brands is start revealing the country of origin and start working on traceability, because only then can you understand the social issues around those mines and the environmental issues around those mines. Traceability on its own is not the end, it's a beginning. So it'll tell me that the stone came from this mine. It doesn't tell me anything about what's happening here. So it's a beginning to then address the social issues. And there's always a place to begin. I call it mild to wild. Mild is baby steps towards sustainability, understanding who your suppliers are. What are the things that you can do within those existing supply chains that will make the lives better in those host communities? If the suppliers aren't telling you what you need to know, there's other suppliers out there. But you should start with your current suppliers because you're using them for a reason. And it's very disruptive to change. And you want to give people the chance to change in a changing world. So the big brands are not off the hook. It's an invitation for a conversation. And start with your existing supply chains, but also, have a special collection for Moyo or other initiatives that have started to blossom, with this opening. So, and then one thing about sustainability I wanted to mention is, I think people are often focusing on the environmental part of sustainability, when sustainability actually means both social and environmental. And so with marketing claims, I think there's been an overemphasis on the environmental because of the planet emergency that we're under right now. But if we only focus on the environmental, we might have a situation where jobs in the global south are replaced by jobs in the global north. And I can't think of a more unjust transition than that. So when you think about recycling, yes, recycling is part of the solution. Make sure it's certified recycled. Thanks very much. Conflict gold can be masked as recycled gold. That's an open secret. When it's lab grown, that can be part of a solution. But lab grown is often in the global north. So when you use the word sustainability, please always look for the social side, because that way it's a really just transition. And that definition of both social and environmental has been used since the 1980s. So let's not go backwards beyond that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I believe that the future environment is all interconnected, from humanitarian solutions to the environment. It's all interconnected. You cannot treat those problems separately. It's not the solution.
Right. I totally agree.
Yeah. And I think consumer demand will keep driving that change, won't it? I mean, from my point of view, I'm seeing more and more, even in gold mining, more responsible, traceable projects coming to life and getting traction, which is great. But it is a case of doing what you can and then doing better.
Yeah. You have to start somewhere. It's really easy to get overwhelmed by all the issues that are in front of us. But if you start somewhere, then you can go somewhere else after that. And progressive approach is how we call it.
Thank you very much to everyone for joining us, and to Gaia and to Christina.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.